If you appreciate my videos, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to help me keep on teaching, writing, and making videos, then please think about becoming a patron. In the Mabinogi, Rhiannon has two different husbands. First, she marries Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, and after he dies, she marries Manawydan fab Llŷr. According to a popular linguistic theory, Teyrnon Twrfliant, a major character in the first branch, may be in the frame as a third consort, with that story not having survived into any texts that we have. In part 1 of this series, I talked about Pwyll, Rhiannon's husband in the first branch of the Mabinogi. You might want to watch that one before you watch this, but here's a brief summary. Pwyll has a story before he meets Rhiannon, in which he travels to the other world, disguised as their king. He deals honorably with the problem of sleeping with a queen who doesn't realize that he isn't her husband, and he defeats the enemy he was sent to fight. After he returns to his own kingdom of Dyfed, Rhiannon appears and proposes marriage to him. They have to overcome a few difficulties on the way to getting married. Then, when Rhiannon gives birth to their son, the newborn baby disappears. Pwyll might have handled the situation better, but to be fair, he could have handled it much worse, and it is at this point in the story that we meet a character who some students of the Mabinogi believe might also be a consort of Rhiannon. Let's look at what happens in this part of the story. After Rhiannon gives birth, a group of waiting women are set to watch over the child, but they all fall asleep. They awake to find him missing. Afraid that they will be punished, these women frame Rhiannon, claiming that she killed and ate her own baby. Rhiannon protests her innocence, and Pwyll, under pressure from his advisors, agrees to punish her by making her sit by a horse-mounting block and offering to carry people on her back. Suddenly, the action of the story jumps to nearby Gwentis Coed, where a man called Teyrnon is having a few problems of his own. Teyrnon, a former member of Pwyll's warband, has a fine mare. Every May Eve she gives birth to a beautiful and sturdy colt foal, but in the morning the foal has always vanished. When we meet Teyrnon, it is May Eve, and he has decided that this year he will bring the mare into his house and stay up all night to guard her. He does this, and his wife retires to bed. Soon the mare gives birth to a fine, strong colt. But then there's a loud noise, and a frightful claw reaches through the window of the house, grabbing the foal. Teyrnon draws his sword and cuts the arm off, saving the colt. There's more noise, and Teyrnon goes out to look for the beast he has wounded, but he finds nothing. He turns back to the house to check the horses, and he finds a newborn baby lying in the doorway. He doesn't know whose baby it is, and he and his wife raise the boy as their own son, until one day Teyrnon hears about Pwyll and Rhiannon's missing child. At this point, he realizes that the child is growing up to look like Pwyll, and the boy is returned to his parents, which is how the story ends. So why do people think that Teyrnon could be a lover or mate of Rhiannon? Well, much of it comes from his name. Teyrnon means great or divine lord or ruler. As you may know, Rhiannon means great or divine queen. When a tale has grown out of older myths like this one, it's worth taking note of things like that. There's only one version of the first branch which has survived, but it comes from earlier stories which seem to have their roots deep in Welsh culture and probably older Celtic culture. These stories may have had major plot differences or called some of the characters by different names. So when I talk about Rhiannon and Teyrnon being consorts, it doesn't mean that the Rhiannon and Teyrnon in this version of the story were sneaking around behind Pwyll's back. There's nothing like that in the text. Instead, the implication is that in an earlier form of the story, Teyrnon may have fathered a child with Rhiannon, although we don't know the circumstances or how the story got into the form we have today. But think about it. Teyrnon is involved with horses, has no children with his wife, who isn't given a name, and then Rhiannon's child turns up at his house. The horse theme can't be overemphasized. Rhiannon's own story is filled with odd references to horses. Now, Teyrnon's mare gives birth on the same night Rhiannon does, and the child is mysteriously delivered into his care. The boy grows up loving horses and is given the now grown-up foal as his first horse, not long before he is returned to Rhiannon by Teyrnon himself. What stories must have existed which contributed to this one is impossible to be sure about. I have compared the stories of Rhiannon and Macha in other videos, and there are many similarities, but I'm not sure whether Teyrnon has a place in that. He bears a couple of superficial similarities to Cruinniuc, the man Macha approaches as a husband, in much the same way Rhiannon approaches Puig. He appears to be an older, wealthy man involved in rearing livestock who lives in an out-of-the-way place. But the similarity seems to end there, with Cruinniuc's actions being more like Puig's, whereas Teyrnon is loyal and helpful to Rhiannon and raises her child. One interpretation of this episode is that on the night of the births, Rhiannon becomes a mare and gives birth to a foal, while at the same time remaining a woman and giving birth to a child. This is no more than a theory, of course, but the fact that she is Teyrnon's mare adds to his importance. There are many mysteries, many wonders surrounding these human and equine births, and we can only guess at their meaning. But I'm convinced there's more to Teyrnon than is visible in the first branch. His name suggests that he may have been presented as a deity in earlier myths, just as Rhiannon may have been openly called a goddess. Or perhaps these names, which are essentially only describing their high, possibly divine status, have replaced earlier names, possibly names of deities, but we'll never know that for sure. In the final part of this series, I'll talk about Manawyddan, Rhiannon's husband, in the third branch.